right, continuing with our exam review questions. For number 15, we have an absolute value inequality. Now, these were the ones that, remember, we said you could look at the sign, and if it looked like I could draw a line right here and it made a capital D, that was a disjunction. That was going to be an or statement. If this was a less than symbol, those are the ones that look like a C. So like this is a less than symbol. That looks more like the letter C. That's a conjunction. That's an and statement. Okay, so that's how we know whether we put an and or an or here. All right, and we said the way that we could do these problems is copy exactly what we've got. So x minus 3 is greater than 1. And then we're going to have the exact same sign on the opposite side. And then we're going to have the opposite of that number. All right, so if we simplify these, add 3 to both sides, and then same thing here, add 3 to both sides. And we usually like to put the x on the left-hand side, so if we have the 2 and the x switch places, then the sign has to turn around. So big N towards the 2, little n towards the x, big N towards the 2, little n towards the x. So this would be our answer. All right, then for 16, they asked us if g of x is 6 minus 2x squared to find g of negative 3. So we're going to put negative 3 in the place of x. So negative 3 in the place of x. So negative 3 squared is positive 9. So that's going to be 6 minus 2 times 9. 2 times 9 is 18, and so 6 minus 18 is negative 12. And remember that you have to do order of operations. You can't do 6 minus 2 is 4, and then 4 times 9 is 36. We have to multiply before we add and subtract. All right, then for number 17, they asked me, is this equation even, odd, or neither? For me, the easiest way to do this is just to graph it. So if I graph x cubed minus x, I can look and see, is it the same graph upside down as it is right side up? If it is, then it's odd. We also could check it algebraically, because algebraically, if we put negative x in the place of x, negative x in the place of x, then we get negative x cubed, and then negative times a negative is a positive x. And so if I factor a negative out of that, I would have x cubed minus x. So you'll notice that is the exact opposite of the function we started with. So that's another way to see it's odd. If it's even, you can fold it on the y-axis and it folds on top of itself. Or if you put a negative x in the place of x, you get the exact same function that you started with. All right, then for number 18 and 19, we're looking at domain. All right, so your domain is going to be all real numbers unless one of two things happens. Number one, you get 0 in the denominator. Number 2, you get a negative under an even indexed radical. All right, so when we're looking at this problem, we don't have a radical, but we do have a fraction. So we cannot get a 0 in the denominator. So anytime we have a fraction, we're going to say that denominator cannot equal 0. So subtract 2 from both sides, and we get that x cannot equal negative 2. So it could be every other number except for negative 2. All right, when we have a radical, the problem is getting a negative under the radical, because that would be imaginary. So what's underneath the radical can't be negative. It can be positive or equal to 0, so greater than or equal to 0. It just can't be negative. So when we have a radical with an even index, square root, fourth root, sixth root, then we're going to take what's underneath the radical and set it greater than or equal to 0. And then again, subtract 2 from both sides, and we've got our domain. All right, then for number 20, they asked me, where is the graph of the function x squared minus 4x plus 3 increasing? Okay, so we know that this is a parabola that's opening up, or you could put it into your calculator and graph it in y equals and get the shape of this graph. So I can see that it's decreasing here and it's increasing here. So it's increasing from its minimum off to positive infinity. So I need to find the minimum. The minimum occurs at the vertex. So all I need to do is just do negative b over 2a. So that would be negative 4 over 2 times 1. So negative 4 is positive 4 over 2, so that would give us positive 2. So if this is x is equal to positive 2 right here, from x equals 2 going off to infinity, that's where it's going to be increasing. If they had asked me where it was decreasing, that would have been from negative infinity to 2. So remember that we always give the x values when we're giving intervals of increasing and decreasing. All right, then for 21, we're going to need our graphing calculator. So let me go grab mine. All right, so on our graphing calculator, I'm going to go to y equals, and I'm going to type in the equation that we have. So we've got x to the third minus 4x squared minus 3. All right, and then I'm going to do a zoom 6. That's the tens all the way around. All right, so there's my graph. And I can't really see the relative minimum. Like, I have a pretty good idea it's going to be down here. So I'm going to go back to my window, and I'm just going to tell it that I want to see some more of those y's down there. So instead of going to -10, I might go to like -20 or something like that. And so then when I graph it, now I can see that whole thing. So what I'm looking for is this minimum right here. All right. So to find that minimum, I'm going to go to second trace, which is my calculate menu. And I can find the maximum or the minimum here, right? So I'm finding the minimum. And I think my minimum is right about here. So you can see it's asking me for a left boundary. So I'm going to go to the left and hit enter. Now it's asking me for a right boundary. So I think my minimum's about right here. So I'm going to go to the right and hit enter. And then I'm going to go back and guess, and it will tell me the exact value of my minimum, and it said to round it to 2 decimal places. So that would be 2.67 and -12.48. All right, then for number 22, it says the table to the right shows the average cost of 5 years tuition at a particular college. Use the regression capabilities of your graphing calculator to create a linear equation to fit the information, and let t equals 1 represent 1991. Okay, so I'm going to go to statistics, and I'm going to go to edit. All right, and in list number 1, I'm going to put the year. So remember it said 1991 would be 1. So I'm going to come up here and clear my list first just to kind of give myself a fresh start. So I go sit on list 1 and just hit clear and then enter. Same thing, go sit on top of list 2 and hit clear and then enter. All right, so for list 1, 1991 would be 1, 1994 would be 4, 1996, 1998, and 2000, right? Because it said let 1 equal 1991. So it's just our years after 1990 is what that's representing. All right, so then we're going to come over here and we'll put in 32,499 and then 35,299, 37,999, 41,399, and 43,899. All right, then it's really important to go back and check your list and make sure that you've typed everything in correctly, because if you have any typos, it will mess your whole thing up and you'll get the wrong answer, right? So just spot checking and making sure that I've entered everything correctly. All right, so then I'm going to go back to statistics, and this time I'm going to go over to calculate. And they told me that this was a linear equation, so I'm going to do a linear regression. And I'm going to tell it to make my x value what's in list 1 and my y value what's in list 2. And then I can come down here to calculate. All right, so what this is telling me is that it said to round the decimals to the nearest whole number. So if I round off A, that's going to be 1302. So that's going to be 1,302x plus my B value was 30,669. So that's going to be y equals 1,302x plus 30,669. All right, so now that I have that equation, then I can answer question number 23. So question 23 says, take that answer that you just got and find out what the tuition would be in the year 2003 based on the equation that we just created. All right. So I'm going to quit out of this. And I'm going to go back to my main screen. So remember my equation was 1,302 times whatever my x value was, and then plus 30,669. So I need to figure out what my x value is. So remember that 1991 was 1, like it's the numbers, it's the number of years after 1990. So 2003 would be 13 years after 1990. So I'd be plugging in 13 for x. And then we could go ahead and fill in the rest of that equation. All right, so then that gives me 47,595. Scooch this over here so you can see it. 47,595. All right, and then our last one for this section, number 24. It said, explain how the following graph is obtained from the graph of y equals x cubed. All right, so if you'll notice, this 2 is stuck to the x. It can't be moved to the other side and grouped with the y. If it had been on the outside of the parentheses, it could have moved. But this one is on the inside, so any value subtracted from x is going to be a horizontal shift. If it's a value that's on the outside that can be moved to the other side, that's being subtracted from y, and that's a vertical shift. So what's being subtracted from x is a positive 2. Remember we said you could think of the opposite of this number. And so that would be a horizontal shift of a positive 2 or to the right 2.